Welcome to this edition of The Soul of Warren County. I'm Mickey Gwyn, and today we have the first part of a two-part interview with the former top cop in the state of Tennessee, the recently retired director of the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations, and my little brother, Mark Gwyn. Mark, welcome to The Soul of Warren County.
Pleasure to be here.
Now, I want our viewers to picture a 5-year-old Mark Gwyn putting on parts of our dad's policeman's uniform, and our dad was a long-serving auxiliary policeman here in McMinnville, and patrolling the interior of our house. I can't count the number of times that me, my brother Larry, and my sister Kathy were arrested by 5-year-old patrolman Mark Gwyn. And Mark, I still don't know what crimes we committed, but looking back, I think you were destined for a career in law enforcement.
You know, I think I knew early on what I wanted to be. The thing I couldn't rationalize was why every time I tried to put handcuffs on you guys, you knocked me across the room. But that being said, it never deterred me from knowing that I wanted to be a law enforcement officer. And I would go sometimes, my dad, as you know, the auxiliary police would be at ball games and events throughout the county and city. And I would go with him sometimes, and just the feeling I got standing beside him with him in that uniform and seeing other police officers in that uniform, there was just no doubt in my mind that that's exactly what I wanted to be when I became an adult.
But during sort of high school, college time, I know when you were in high school, you were covering sports events for the school newspaper. You were doing the same thing for the Warren County News. You went to MTSU and pursued a communications degree. So were you a little still trying to find your way at that point?
You know, I think in some ways they paralleled. I think being a journalist, you gather facts. Being a criminal investigator, you gather facts. So I think that it was similar. My interest really was kind of parallel with, yeah, I want to be a police officer and gather facts about crimes. But yeah, I like the journalism part of gathering facts about sports and sporting events and things like that. So I think the fact gathering was at the focal point of my attention of what I wanted to be. And so I just channeled that through going to college, learning how to be a journalist, which was very helpful in being a police officer and a TBI agent. If you go and you interview today to be a TBI agent, an FBI agent, or any type of law enforcement officer like that, they'll tell you that report writing and interviewing is probably the most important part of that job. So it really was a foundation for me becoming a police officer and a TBI agent.
Interesting how you sort of meld those two together, because you wouldn't think law enforcement and journalism and communication would be sort of parallel, but that's interesting that you say that. And you actually left MTSU with the offer for an internship in Nashville Channel 4, right?
Yeah, I had an offer of an internship, but at the same time, I had an offer to be a police officer back in here in McMinnville. And the unique thing about it was, at that time, it was very hard to become a police officer in the state of Tennessee. I checked a lot of police departments around Nashville and Murfreesboro, and they just weren't hiring. I mean, it was, if you didn't have any experience, it was very hard to get on. And I was fortunate enough to come back here to McMinnville. The police department was doing some promotions, which created a couple patrolman positions. And I interviewed and was selected to be a patrolman here in McMinnville, and was very ecstatic about it, I can tell you, on a lot of different fronts. You know, I was able to come back to a small department, get a lot of hands-on training, but come back to my community and protect the people that I grew up around, and family and friends. And so it was really, people often have asked me, tell me about your career and what would you have done differently and this and that. There's nothing I would have done differently, especially the part of coming back here to McMinnville and being a police officer. That was the best decision that I could have ever made.
And to back up just a little bit, while you were at MTSU, you were riding with the campus patrol or something?
Well, I was on student patrol,
Student patrol,
and
okay.
MTSU has a very, very good student patrol program that has an array of things from, their ticket writers and then at night I was mainly working at night where we would go around and lock up the buildings. We would do escorts, from say an event or the library if somebody was leaving late at night and needed an escort back to their dorm or to their car. And we would work closely with the full-time police officers. So it was really a good opening, not that I think I probably need it because, it just fueled the fire of me wanting to become a police officer, but it really gave me some insight on what policing was and what the full-time officers did as patrol. And then you got to know a lot of Murfreesboro police officers. And I tried to talk to everybody I could that was in the law enforcement arena to just try to find out the good, the bad, about how they liked their job, what they didn't like about their job. But for me, my mind was made up. I was going to be a police officer somewhere. I didn't really know where, but that was going to happen some way or the other. And don't get me wrong, I don't regret majoring in communications because I think that was so important to almost any type of job. I think it's hard to make it in this world if you can't communicate, no matter what you want to be. Now I know it's maybe a little easier now that we've gone to all the non-in-person actions regarding Zoom calls and meetings that are virtual and things. But at the end of the day, if you can't communicate, I don't know how you're going to make it in any kind of profession.
And I think looking back as a family, we probably didn't know the passion you had for being a policeman. And I can remember I was in the Air Force at the time and talking to my mom, and I'm sure some of that was because my mom is a worrier anyway. But I remember she would say, well, Mark's come back and he's looking at being a policeman. And I'm like, what is he thinking? He's got a degree, he's been offered an internship, and he wants to come back to McMinnville to be a policeman. But I just don't think we knew that fire, as you mentioned, that was burning inside of you. And tell us a little bit about when you talked to Dad about wanting to do that. And he's the one that sort of took you up to talk to the police chief.
Yeah, my dad knew the police chief, a man by the name of Bobby Southern. And I told my dad, I said, I want to be a police officer. I really want to be a police officer. Will you take me up to meet the chief? And he said, I'll do it, but on one condition. I said, what is that? You cannot tell your mother. And I said, that's a deal. I won't tell her. So we went up, met the police chief, and it was kind of one of those things. I don't know that I really talked to anybody that said, yeah, you need to be a police officer. Even when I went up and met with the chief, he was like, are you sure you want to do this? You have a college degree? And I said, yes, sir, I know 100% I want to do this. And so he said, okay, then, I'm going to make some promotions. I think I'll have some openings. If you can interview well and all that, then, may have opportunity for a job. But yeah, there was no doubt. But I think part of that, there was a good bit of age gap between you and my sister and my older brother. So I think as all that was formulating and, I'm watching, I only watched police shows, Adam 12,
Right,
Dragnet,
right.
and all of that. I don't think you guys were probably around to see that, so I could understand that. But like I said, I think as early as 5 years old, I kind of knew what I wanted to be and tried to chart that path. But it wasn't easy, I can tell you. As I said, at that time, law enforcement jobs were really hard to come, even if you had a degree, were very hard to get, especially in the Middle Tennessee area.
Mm-hmm. And do you think back of why that was so hard? Was it just a very desired occupation, or?
Well, part of it was a lot of universities in this area have a very robust criminal justice program.
Right.
MTSU, Tennessee State, and they were, a lot of people with criminal justice degrees were coming out and entering into law enforcement. So for me, I didn't have a criminal justice degree, but I did have the student patrol and a lot of people in my corner. But there was just a lot of people wanting those jobs, and the departments weren't as big as they are now. So you take a department like McMinnville or even Murfreesboro, they just didn't have that many positions open. So you've got a person coming out with a criminal justice degree, maybe did an internship at a police department or sheriff's department. They just were ahead on the list. And so I felt myself pretty fortunate to get the job here, really.
And you talk about the communication aspect of it. I think Mark Gwyn was really intrigued by the excitement part of being. You think that was part of it too? You knew it was every day was going to be different, and you just didn't know what was going to come at you every day. Was that part of it too?
Sure. I mean, it was, but I think moreover than that, it was really, I had a serving part in me. I wanted to serve and I wanted to protect. Mm-hmm. I think if you ask me what was the really driving force of you becoming a law enforcement officer, I will tell you that I truly wanted to serve and protect. And yeah, the excitement came and it was there, and it was something like, when you hear people tell you law enforcement gets in your blood, it's true. There's no feeling like it. But you've got to have that want to serve and protect. And if you don't, it's hard to become, I think, truly successful in the law enforcement arena.
And you said chief was Bobby Souther?
Bobby Souther was the chief, yeah.
Who were some of the other folks that were on the force at that time that sort of mentored you and helped you start your career?
My shift consisted of Chuck Stone was the lieutenant, John Wayne Hollingsworth was a sergeant, Chuck Taylor and Kelly Roberts and I, and then Mike Durham was the dispatcher. And we worked at that time 4 days on, 4 days off. And I can tell you that those 4 days off molded me just as much as those 4 days on, because, I come onto this shift, they took me under their wings, taught me how to hunt, taught me how to fish. Chuck Stone and I would go to the car sales on our 4 days off. He sold used cars on the side. And I'd have these conversations with these guys that had so much experience and had seen so much. And so for me, those 4 days off were just as important molding my life and my career as the 4 days on. And I got to see these men, how they, interacted with the citizens of McMinnville and how, it's very easy as a, I was 22 when I become a police officer. That's young. So you're going to be influenced. I mean, there's no way you're not going to be influenced. The key is, are you going to be influenced in a good way or a bad way? And for law enforcement, that's make it or break it. So, to see them and be trained by men of such character and integrity that really knew how to treat people right, that knew the right way to talk to people. Because at the end of the day, you're a police officer. You're going to have to make arrests. Right. You're going to have to write tickets. You're going to have to do things that they're going to be a certain part of the public's not going to like you for. But it's the way you do it. They may not like you, but they're going to respect you. Mm-hmm. So, I was so blessed to be able to work with men like that. And there were other people on the police department. And if I start naming names, I'm going to get in trouble because there were so many, because I tried to talk to everybody. But I can remember I go out to the, I'd never shot a handgun very much. I'd shot shotguns, early on in my life a little bit, but never a handgun. So I go out to the range the first time after I'm hired to qualify and just do miserable. I mean, I'm like, just horrible. And I can remember Bob Patterson, who is now retired, but he took me out to the range after that. And I thought I wouldn't get the job. I mean, if you can't qualify, you can't be a police officer, right? But he took me out there day after day after day and just slowly, started teaching me how to shoot a handgun. And then, 2 or 3 years later, before I ended my career at McMinnville, I was shooting expert. But without him, he could have very easily said, the guy can't shoot. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, Chief. I don't know what you're going to do with him, but he can't carry a gun. But that wasn't the case. It was people were willing to say, we'll teach you how to shoot a handgun, and they did. So I can name so many people that really molded my career and gave me the foundation that I think without that, I know without that, I would not have been successful at the TBI. Don't know if I'd even got the job at the TBI, but would not have been successful.
So being a police officer, and especially in your career, it's more than just that person in the patrol car driving down. It seems like it's almost not a 24-hour job by any means, but it's part of it consumes most of your life during that time. Even off duty, you talk about going hunting and fishing and things like that. Having that kind of relationship with the people you work with makes the job easier.
Well, it not only makes it easier, law enforcement is about trust. I mean, at the end of the day, whether you're in the smallest city in Tennessee or the largest, the goal is to get home safe at night. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that depends on the people you're working with. That, you don't know when you go up and knock on that door, what's behind that door. Well, the thing is, you've got to trust that person beside you, that when you have to go through that door, if there's something bad on the other side, that we're going to take care of each other. So that's the biggest part of law enforcement, is building that trust. And that's what I liked about the fact of the way McMinnville was structured with the shifts, and we all, the same people, work together every day and every night. So it was easier, I think, to mold that bond. It wasn't like there was a first shift and a second shift and a third shift, and you'd move around and you would be working with different people. And there's some belief that that's a better way to enforce,
right,
or to run a department. But I really think the fact that we all worked together, we were off together, so that meant we could spend time together, off duty, really created a bond that I don't know I've had in any other career, my whole career, a bond like that, because it was very strong. And I was just so thankful that they accepted me, because it would have been very easy not to. Here's this little 22-year-old guy with a college degree coming in here. We think he probably thinks he knows more than we do.
Right.
But it wasn't that at all. I mean, it was just, come on, you're one of us, and we had so many great memories on that shift. It was just a lot of fun. And the department at whole, it was just a good environment, a good culture. And I can't thank the people enough that helped me build that foundation to move on. And I can tell you, I can say this now, when I really received the opportunity to go to TBI, I didn't want to go to TBI. I was enjoying the McMinnville Police Department so much that it was one of those things that at the end of the day, I sat down and told myself, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity probably. I got to take it. But did I want it? No. I wanted to stay right here doing what I was doing, because I was enjoying it so much.
And even though you talk about your age at the time, obviously you were mature enough to know that in order for your career to be successful, you were going to have to depend on those experienced guys. You mentioned the firearms training. They would have to sort of warm up to you also and want to help you. And you obviously was mature enough to realize that you needed them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some of that came from MTSU, being able to associate with the full-time officers and kind of understanding what it was. But yeah, absolutely. At the time I went on TBI was hiring a lot of agents that had no law enforcement experience. That was the director's plan. That's what he felt was best, was that he could hire someone with no law enforcement experience and kind of mold them into the TBI way.
Right.
But I can tell you that when I came on with a group where I was probably the only person that had law enforcement experience. The difference was evident.
Yeah.
It was very evident that there was just things I knew by being a police officer that they didn't really know, and took them a lot longer to grasp.
You were hired on in '85
To
McMinnville Police
Yes,
Department?
yes, in
85, and you were there to '88, if I remember correctly. Thinking back, what is the most memorable event during that time? Whether, the relationships with the guys or maybe some particular criminal type of event. What stays in your mind?
You know, it wasn't really the criminal type events. I mean, there was no, I wasn't a detective, so there was no. I mean, there was, I can remember a couple murders or whatever, but my involvement was very limited. I think that one of the things I remember the most is when Mr. Robert Bonner was shot in his office, and we went out there to get the person that did that. But moreover, it was just the relationships and the knowledge and the experience that I gained by being around people that had more experience. And I think I took that all the way up to being director of TBI, that belief that you always surround yourself with people that are a lot smarter, a lot better, that can do the job a lot better than you can, know a lot more, because that was the key to my success as a police officer, and it was key to my success as TBI director. So I always tried to be around. I learned that early that, hey, if I'm going to be successful, I need to be around people that can help me be successful, because I can't do it on my own.
Right.
I don't have the knowledge. I don't have the experience. So I've got to be around those people that I can learn and understand that I just need to really sit down and listen. I need to sit down and listen and take in and watch. Just watch how they interact with people, watch how they get things done, watch how they're effective. And don't get me wrong, many times you can learn just as much of what not to do as what to do. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying everybody was perfect and did it the right way. I learned from some of these people the way not to do it. But once you get to that point, you kind of take your experience and then put your own personality and your own life events and all of that into it. And that's what you mold into what you're going to be. It's a combination of the experience that you've learned over the years from people that were a lot more experienced and a lot smarter, and then your own abilities, whatever they may be, your own strengths, your own weaknesses, and that's what turns you into what you're going to ultimately be in the end.
And going back to the event involving unfortunate events with Mr. Bonner, I'm sure the adrenaline kicked in, your training obviously kicked in during that time. Do you remember the emotions during that event?
Well, we got out to that house, I remember, and there's a picture somewhere of us all behind a police car there, because he started shooting at us. Mm-hmm. And, you start thinking about your training, but number one is once again, how do we all get home safe tonight? We've got someone in a house that we know have just killed somebody. How do we keep that person from harming one of us and bringing them into custody and bringing them to justice the way it needs to be done? And so that's your main thought, is how do I survive? But moreover is how do we all survive?
Right. I can only imagine being in that type of situation, and it takes, and I've always said to you, it takes special people to be public servants, whether it's policemen, firemen, military, and I was in the military myself. But to be in those kind of situations, I'm sure that like you say, the emotions are just probably flowing all over, a different type of emotions going through as you're going through that event.
And and I had a career where I was able to, work undercover and do things undercover, and looking back on them, they should have been very stressful. You're here and you know that if this person finds out who you are, most likely they're going to kill you right there.
Right.
But you never really think about that while you're doing it. And I don't know if it's because you're young and you're just caught up in the moment, but you're really thinking about, this is a bad guy that's going to harm people that I took an oath to protect. So I'm just doing my job. I've got to do a good enough job that we take this person off the street and keep them from harming anyone else. And so that was kind of my mindset, and that's how I funneled my ambition to be better and to know that, hey, you know what, I may be the person that can take someone off the streets today that would keep them from hurting someone very seriously tomorrow. But also, you've got to understand, especially when I was a police officer, what's that balance between I'm going to write this ticket, or I'm going to write this as a warning ticket, or I'm going to let this person just go on their way. And you had to figure all that out. What's the balance? You know, I can remember my Lieutenant Chuck Stone telling me one time, you don't have to stop every car in McMinnville, and you don't have to arrest every person in McMinnville. And you know, for the young guy, man, you want to do it all. You know, I'm protecting.
Right.
You know, that's how I protect. But when you have good mentors like that you understand that, you know what, I can write you a warning today, and then next week, if I catch you doing the same thing, I give you that break. So you may have to take a little more this time. And once you start, you know, and let's face it, it's maturity. Mm-hmm. Once you start maturing and understanding, it kind of falls in place. But early on, boy, it's hard to just, because you want to protect everybody. And hey, if they're going 5 miles over the limit, they need a ticket.
Right.
No, not necessarily. So it was great. It was just a great learning experience. It was a great time for me to come back here to McMinnville and be a police officer. And without it, I would not have been director of TBI. I don't know if I'd been an agent or a very good agent.
Right.
Yeah.
Dispel an old adage. Was the attitude of the person that you pulled over initially, how big a role did that play in if you gave them a warning, you just let them go, or maybe you did give it a ticket?
Well,
did that play a big role, or did you have your mind made up already when you stopped them?
It just depends. It really depends. And you know, the thing about it is, police officers are human beings just like everybody else.
Right.
And you know, you have your gamut of emotions and feelings and personalities, and you know, so you know, it really, every stop, every call you answered, whether it was a domestic call or whatever, they were all individualized, and because they were all different, because you were dealing with different people. But I can tell you what it did is that you learn very quickly what your personal skills were, mm-hmm. and how good you were dealing with public and people, and you had to develop those skills pretty quickly, or you couldn't make it. I mean, because you know, just one word could turn an incident, a very innocent incident, a traffic stop, to something very bad.
Right.
You know, and so you learn very quickly how to assimilate with the public and how to talk to the public, because if you didn't, you couldn't make it, because you couldn't have every traffic stop turn into an altercation. Right. And that could happen. I mean, you know, it could very well happen. So, yeah, you learn communication skills very well. And I go back to saying I go back to saying, hey, I think majoring in communications helped me.
Helped you. Yeah, I can see that. All right. Well, let's stop here. As I say, this is a two-part program where we primarily today talked about your career up to being a McMinnville policeman. I'm sure if you were living in McMinnville in the 1985-88 era, you probably slept very well at night, knowing that Patrolman Mark Gwyn was on patrol. So please join us for the next edition of The Soul of Warren County. Check Ben Lomond TV Channel 6 for the airing of Part 2. I'm Mickey Gwyn, and I'm wishing every one of you a great rest of the day.